What is the fighter class like in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? What's that all about? And will you be fighting to play as him? Spoilers, yes, he crits like a truck hitting a tortoise. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this video chapter, I'm going to be starting a new series of videos where I do a somewhat detailed summary of all of the classes in Pathfinder 2e in that Dominomicon style, and we're starting with the classic fighter. I'll start things off with a summary of what the fighter's all about, then dive into what makes it unique and how it actually feels to play. After that, we'll have a quick pros and cons list, then we'll run through some standout feats, and finally wrap things up with a rating of what the fighter's good and terrible at, plus how complex it really is to play. If you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member or becoming a patron, etc. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. But let's venture forth, strike the music with that +2 to hit. Quick disclaimer before I start. Obviously, this class summary does not include anything like ancestry feats or dedications, etc. This is just this class. No frills, no optional extras, no random stuff. Alright, the classic fighter is a class that's been around since the beginning of time itself, or at least pretty much the beginning of tabletop role-playing games. This class is all about consistently hitting and critting, and has a lot of potential build options due to its vast selection of feats. Who needs subclasses or even spells when you can stab a thing in the face and crit up to 10% more than almost everyone else in the whole system. The fighter is a martial class with 10 HP plus constitution. It has trained proficiency in all armors plus unarmored defense. It's an expert with simple and martial weapons plus unarmed attacks, more on that later, and is trained in advanced weapons also. Its key attribute is strength or dexterity, and it's an expert in perception. As for its saving throws, it's an expert in fortitude and reflex and trained in will. It starts with training in either acrobatics or athletics and gets 3 skills plus intelligence modifier, and it's trained in fighter class DC. With the boring stuff out of the way, let's actually go over what makes this class unique. First of all, as I already said, there are no subclasses for fighter, and because it's a martial class, you do get a class feat choice at level 1. And that's kind of how you're going to build this particular class. You don't pick subclasses, you instead pick feats, and you would end up trying to build around a particular theme for your fighter by picking particular feats. Ultimately, this is a 100% pure martial, and whether you're grabbing feats to slow down enemies, to strike at further range, or to hit multiple baddies at once, you're going to be specializing in doing consistently good damage with very good chances of critting also. These extra crits happen because the fighter is an expert with all martial weapons from level 1. This means that they have an inherent +2 to hit over every other class except the gunslinger, which gets the same but with just firearms. This means that crits come fast and often because in this system, as we all know, every +1 matters. And a +2 thusly is kind of mental. And due to the fact that they have the second highest health in the system, plus they have training in heavy armor from level 1 and they start with shield block, they are potentially pretty tanky, all depending on how you want to build them. To top that off, they are the only class in the entire system, as of the release of this video, that begins the game with reactive strike. And this is sort of a big deal, so much of a big deal that a lot of players build around this inherent class feature. And that's because intelligent enemies will realize once the fighter whacks them with a reactive strike that they need to alter their tactics, and that means they have to change the positioning on the battlefield and just basically change everything that they do. It's incredibly strong. It not only locks down the battlefield, but it also potentially gives you extra crits and extra hits. Speaking of things that make the fighter unique, let's go over the rest of its class features as you level it up. Once you reach 3rd level, you'll get bravery as a class feature, which makes getting the fighting condition even harder for you, and even when you do, you reduce its value by 1. At 5th level, you'll gain fighter weapon mastery, which boosts your proficiency to master in one weapon group and gives you critical specialization in the same weapon group. And at 7th, you just straight up do more damage from 2 to eventually 4 with weapons and unarmed attacks as your proficiency goes up with weapon specialization. You also grab Battlefield Surveyor, which increases your proficiency with perception to master, and you also gain a +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks for initiative, which makes incredible initiative kind of pointless. At 9th, you'll get combat flexibility, which gives you a fighter class feat you can change daily. Your armor proficiency increases to expert at level 11, as does your class DC, and at 13th, all of your proficiency for weapons increase to master, with advanced going to expert, and one weapon group gets to become legendary, with advanced of the same group being master. At 15th, you basically double your extra damage from that weapon specialization thing and gain another feat you can change daily. And lastly, at 17th, your armor proficiency becomes master, as does your class DC. Of course, it also gets saving throws that go up and get better like all classes, and the fighter specializes in fortitude and reflex. Suffice to say, say, if you're looking to play as a martial class that is potentially pretty simple and hits hard rather consistently with pretty good survivability, reactive strike from level 1, and with the best weapon scaling in the entire system, this is the class for you. So, what does the fighter feel like to play? Honestly, you're going to feel like you're critting an awful lot and hitting a lot more than all of your allies. So long as you're flanking, which is pretty easy to do with a class like this unless you're playing at range, which does make things a little bit more tricky, you're going to be successfully hitting almost all of the time. There's not really any cooldowns to worry about, or spell slots or focus spells, etc. So as long as you're rolling relatively well and positioning yourself okay-ish, you're going to be doing pretty darned well. And you're going to feel like you're really having an impact on the battlefield. It's kind of like playing on easy mode and everyone else is playing in the trickier version of this system. With that said, it doesn't mean that it's super duper simple. You can make this class rather complex when you start selecting your class feats, etc. It's kind of simple to learn and tactical to master. This class really does feel fun to play as though. It's almost like it barely ever lets up. You are just consistently battering things and even generally surviving pretty hefty blows yourself. And because of all the build variety, you're never going to come across two fighters that are exactly the same. You could play as a fighter that specializes in reach weapons, a fighter that specializes in doing dual-handed attacks, a fighter that specializes in using shields, etc. There's lots of different ways to play this class, and that also means that roleplay potential is effectively infinite. You can be any type of character you want to be as a fighter. And as you level, you end up grabbing lots of different feats to help with different sorts of encounters. You can build them with one specific theme in mind, but you can also build them to be quite variable with the whole combat flexibility thing. If you know you're going to be fighting flying enemies, you can take Felling Strike as an example. And you are definitely going to feel your reactive strike triggering time and time again, especially at the lower levels. You're going to absolutely love that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention team play as a fighter. You're an excellent contender for helping flank with allies due to your good survivability, and with reactive strike, moving into positions to kind of force enemies to move away from you is always an excellent tactic. Positioning is very important for a fighter and really helps your allies too. You'll really feel incredibly useful if you use positioning correctly as a fighter. Okay, I think that's enough gushing for now. Let's move on to the pros and cons. Pros: simple to learn. As I've already said, it's a rather easy class to play. I do highly recommend this class to beginners, but it does have some intriguing build options for those who want to master it instead. It survives rather well. It's not the tankiest of the classes, but it's up there. It's going to take more than one or maybe even two crits to actually put you down. Build versatility. This class gets so many feats and no subclass that it really is an open book on the sort of build you want to give it. There's lots of different ways to play fighters, and you can play multiple across multiple campaigns, and they're probably not really going to feel the same at all. Every turn is fun. You're practically always doing something interesting as a fighter. It barely ever lets up. You hit a lot. Yes, I've already mentioned this about 47 times, but that's because this really is the fighter's thing. You're just hitting constantly and critting a lot of the time too. If you like to constantly see damage numbers, this is probably the best class for that. On to cons. No magic. This one's pretty obvious, but obviously this class just has literally zero magic abilities. It has absolutely nothing at all. Gear reliant. If your GM does not like giving you money, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna absolutely be tied to your gear as a fighter. Not a great deal of utility or support. Yeah, you hit like a truck with a rocket on the back, but you're not gonna be great at dealing with things outside of murder time. That +2 to hit. If damage isn't your thing, honestly, this class is not going to be amazing for you. You can build it to do a few other things, but ultimately it's going to be mostly about hitting stuff. Limited AoE. You do get a few area of effect abilities as you level up, but generally, like most martials in the system, you're going to struggle if you want to blast multiple enemies at once. Okay, let's take a look at some of the more kick-ass feats the fighter class has. There's no rules for this particular section, aside from me starting with lower levels and working up towards the higher levels. I'm just going to be picking and choosing feats that I think sound really interesting. I'm not going to be going over every single one, just some of the cool ones that stood out to me. This will just be a sample selection of feats that I think are interesting and or powerful. Sudden Charge. For 2 actions, you can stride twice and then attack. As part of this movement, you can burrow, climb, fly, or swim if you have the appropriate movement type. This feat is incredibly strong, especially considering you can get it at level 1. If you're choosing to play as a fighter who's going to be wearing heavy armor, maybe has a large shield, etc., your movement speed might not be all that good. And with this ability, it can kind of negate that issue the majority of the time. Action compression is always fantastic, and honestly this feat is probably one of the most powerful level 1 feats in the entire system for melee-based martials. Combat Assessment. Probably an underrated feat. Combat Assessment just lets you make a free recall knowledge check after you whack an enemy successfully. And if you crit, you get a +2 circumstance bonus to that check, which is very helpful as a fighter because they don't necessarily specialize in skills that help with recall knowledge. You can only really do this once per enemy because the cooldown is 1 day, but honestly, Recall Knowledge is, in my opinion, probably the most powerful skill action in the whole system, and that's why I mentioned it in my 5 fabulous skill actions video. And you getting to do it for free once every fight for every enemy is incredibly strong. Do not sleep on combat assessment. Reactive Shield. While you're unable to combine this with Shield Block, as this eats up your reaction for this turn, at least until later levels anyway, which we'll get to, Reactive Shield is pretty good because it just allows you to instantaneously increase your AC by up to 2. This can not only avoid a hit, but could potentially avoid a crit too. A pretty strong feat. Point Blank Stance. For all the ranged fighters out there, this allows you to use a longbow up close, and as it's a stance, it's practically permanent once you spend an action getting into the stance. Normally, when you use a longbow, they have the Volley 30-foot trait, which means that you take a -2 circumstance penalty when attacking enemies within that 30 feet. Longbows do a little more damage than shortbows, though shortbows do not come with the Volley trait, so it's usually a trade-off, but with Point Blank Stance, you don't have to make that trade-off anymore. On top of that, if you still choose to use something like a shortbow, you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to damage rolls against targets within that first weapon range increment. I'd actually say at the lower levels, it's worth using the shortbow instead of the longbow, because the +2 damage is really good at low levels and it doesn't scale. So yes, maybe use shortbow for now and then switch to longbow eventually. Still a very good feat for ranged characters. Vicious Swing. This on a hit will deal an extra dice of damage. It's 2 actions and contributes as 2 attacks towards map, but it's still very strong to be able to get off an extra dice of damage without having to worry about hitting twice. And once you get to 10th level, the dice amount increases and it does at 18th as well. And considering with Fighter you get that +2 to hit, realistically your first hit has the biggest chances of being a crit, so you're going to want to use Vicious Swing with it. Realistically, what are your chances of actually getting a crit on that second attack? That's why this feat feels so strong. It's almost another hit and you use it with no map. Lunge. Lunge is a single action that increases your reach by 5 feet, and that is pretty much it. So why is this so strong? Well, aside from when you're using specific attacks like Reactive Strike or Vicious Swing, etc., this can just replace your normal attack and gives you an extra 5-foot reach on those normal strikes. Even better, if you're using a weapon with reach anyway, this increases that reach, so you can have a 15-foot reach weapon at level 2, which is madness. And there's no cooldown, no specific traits, this literally can just replace your normal attack. Intimidating Strike. This is a 2-action strike that on a hit makes the enemy frightened 1, no saving throw, and on a crit makes them frightened 2, again, no saving throw. They are just frightened and that's that. How is this not a good feat? Frightened is one of the greatest debuffs in the entire system, and getting to do it at level 2 just for hitting, which you're pretty much always doing anyway, is unbelievably good. Rebounding Toss. With this feat, you make a ranged strike with a thrown weapon, and if it hits, it bounces and hits another enemy with an additional strike. It's 2 actions, but neither of these attacks count towards multiple attack penalty until after they've been made. Put a returning rune on it, and you're basically Captain America, throwing his shield and having it come back to him. Excellent stuff. Parting Shot. As a ranged fighter, do you want to make your enemy off guard without needing a check? Well, it's going to cost you an action, but that's all. With Parting Shot, for 2 actions, you step, then attack, and your enemy is off guard to that attack. You've already got a +2 to hit. This just effectively turns it into a +4 for 1 extra action. Yes, please. Swipe. This one's rather simple. You get to swipe at 2 enemies for 2 actions without multiple attack penalty until after the attacks are completed. Plus, you only roll once and apply both the attack roll and damage rolls to both enemies. Marshals kind of struggle with area of effect abilities, as I've mentioned before, so this is a very strong feat to have. Slam Down. For 2 actions, you can hit an enemy, and if you hit and deal damage, you get an athletics check to trip the enemy, regardless of whether or not you're wielding a 2-handed weapon, and there's no map until after you've done these attacks. Having an enemy prone is just fantastic, and getting to do that while hitting without map is super fantastic. Advanced Weapon Training. This feat is pretty strong if you're interested in using advanced weapons. Basically, you just choose a single weapon group and you treat all advanced weapons in that group as if they're a martial weapon. This means you get your crazy +2 that's basically ahead of everyone else to hit with that group of advanced weapons. If you want to use advanced weapons as a fighter, this is the way to do it. Unless you're a human and you pick unconventional weaponry, or you take as a general feat adopted ancestry, pick human and then take unconventional weaponry. But that's cheating, so shh. Dazing Blow. For all the fighters that like a grapple, if you have a creature grappled, you can do a Dazing Blow and then for 1 action once you take this feat. First of all, you give them a bonk, which is lovely, and it ends up being bludgeoning damage specifically. And then if it hits the creature, they must make a Fortitude save against your class DC. If they fail, they are stunned 2, which is freaking awesome. And even on a success, they're stunned 1, and on a crit fail, they lose their entire turn. If you like to grab creatures, this is a no-brainer. The only downside is that this does have the press trait, meaning you cannot use this particular action unless you're already suffering from maps, such as when you grabbed them, for example. Still, it's very strong, and I highly recommend it to anyone who likes likes to grabby grab. Shield Warden. With Shield Warden, as long as you have your shield raised, you can basically use shield block on an adjacent ally. This may seem small, but I'm telling you, if that ally is a caster or someone who is squishy, they will absolutely love you for it, and they'll definitely give you all of their gold. Definitely. And if they don't, just send them here and I'll tell them off. Incredible Aim. Would you like to have a +2 circumstance bonus to your attack roll with a ranged weapon as a fighter? The answer is yes, because why wouldn't it be? Take Incredible Aim, and you also get to ignore the target's concealed condition if they happen to be off guard as well. That's effectively a +6 you just got for 1 extra action. I don't think I need to say any more. Quick Shield Block. I absolutely love Quick Shield Block. At the start of your turns, you gain an additional reaction you can use just for Shield Block, meaning that if you took Reactive Shield, you can Reactive Shield and Shield Block all at the same time. Normally in PF2E, there are limitations on triggers if they are the same trigger, but here the triggers are actually different, meaning that you can indeed Reactive Shield and then Shield Block. Still, you don't even need Reactive Shield to make this feat incredible, because this just allows you to block a second attack once you have your shield raised every single turn, and if you would like, it allows you to shield block and reactive strike and so on, etc. Having an extra reaction is just amazing. Oh my god, Fighter has way too many good feats. Honestly, it's like PF2E made all these rules and Fighter just comes along and says, yeah, I'm gonna break half these with my feet, so screw you. So you have no idea how many of these I'm having to skip over, so this video doesn't end up being like 5 hours long. So I'm just gonna have to pick 1 feat for every 2 levels now to keep this relatively succinct. Wait a minute.
Succinct.
Succinct? I just thought it was succinct. But why would it have suck in there? There's no sucking going on unless you're talking about me in general. And that's not a euphemism, I just suck in general because I'm a loser. Crashing Slam. This requires that you've already chosen Slam Down, but oh my goodness, this is incredible. This is now a single action, and if you hit, there's no trip attempts, they just automatically are tripped with a crit success. And if you're using a 2-handed melee weapon for the strike, the regular damage for crit trip is instead replaced with the weapon's damage die. Considering this is effectively a passive ability, as long as you already have Slam Down, it's just stupidly strong. Fighter is an absolute beast. Paragon's Guard. This stance means that you are permanently raising your shield. That's it. That's all it needs to be because it's absolutely amazing. Whirlwind Strike. This 3-action ability has you make a melee strike against every single enemy within your melee reach, and map does not apply until after you have finished all attacks. If you have a reach weapon, this is mental, like actually completely bonkers. Overwhelming Blow. Again, not a euphemism. This 3-action attack forces you to be stunned and off guard until the start of your next turn, but it does automatically turn a hit into a crit, and if it was a normal crit anyway, your weapon gains the Deadly D12 trait. This one costs a lot, but is worth a ton. Impossible Volley. This 3-action attack allows you to make 1 strike with a -2 penalty against every enemy within a 10-foot burst, centered at or beyond your weapon's volley range. Again, a crazy area of effect for a martial character, which shouldn't be all that good at them. Sever Space. I have to pick Sever Space for this one because it's ridiculous. You destroy the space between you and your target. Your attack gains an 80-foot reach, and after the strike has happened, whether it's succeeded or not, you and the target are adjacent to each other. This one is just kind of ridiculous, but I absolutely love it. It's super crazy anime at its most ridiculous, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, as you can see from just a selection of feats, there are a lot of ways to build a fighter, and I didn't even go any of the 2-weapon fighter feats. You can indeed build a variety of different fighters, whether they specialize in damage up close or at range, or whether they specialize in tanking or defending allies etc. Generally, they don't have a great deal of support or utility, but they do have a few abilities here and there that they can use. And with that in mind, let's move on to the last category for fighter in this video chapter. What is it good at and what does it suck at? To explain this, I've created 5 different categories, and each one has 2 subcategories, and I will rank the fighter out of 3 for each subcategory. I will be using this category system for every class in this series, and bear in mind that this is from my experience with the class itself from both the player's and GM's perspective. First up, offense, split into melee and ranged. Obviously, with this being a martial class, all of its attacks are non-magical, so I would say you could play fighter as a very powerful ranged or melee combatant, so I'm going to give it 3 pikes gutting a boar out of 3. On to defense, split into personal durability and team protection. The fighter is quite tanky, but it's not the tankiest of all the classes, and it does have some relatively decent team protection too, so I'm going to give this 2 armor plates guarding your crotch out of 3. And now we have support split into buffing and healing. Yeah, the fighter kind of sucks here. He does basically 0 buffing and 0 healing, so 0 out of 3. 3, sadly. Next is control, split into crowd control and debuffing. For crowd control, I guess the fighter can do some things like grabbing and tripping, etc., and they do get some feats that help with that. And for debuffing, I'd probably say yes, a few abilities like intimidating strike, etc., so it's not great at these things, but it's okay. So I'm going to give it a low 2 tripped ogres out of 3. Last is utility, split into magical and skill. Obviously the fighter has 0 magical utility, and as for skill, it can maybe do some leaps and the like, plus it does have combat assessment for free recall knowledges. I'll probably give it 1 broken rope out of 3. And here's a bar graph summarizing the fighter's class rolls, in my opinion anyway, so it might not be 100% accurate. Take this summary with a pinch of garlic salt, because garlic salt is yummy. Now before we finish up, how complex is the fighter? Well, in my class complexity tier list, I put it in the A tier for accessible, and I will probably keep it there. It's not as simple as some of the other martial classes, but generally speaking, it is rather simple. You can build it for more complexity, but you don't have to. So yes, I would say it is rather accessible indeed. And that is going to be the end of my class summary video chapter for the fighter. Hopefully you have a pretty good understanding now of how the fighter class works in PF2E, and hopefully I've showcased a few feats and possible ideas for this class you may never have considered before. If you found this video chapter helpful or enjoyable, please consider giving it a like or subscribing, and if you want to support the channel financially, you can become a member by pressing the join button, or a patron by following the first link in the description. I'd like to give a shout out to my members and archivist Max Magnus 20019, Aussie Smith and Shard, and to my patron and archivist Clash. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominomicon wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.